Freedom is not free. It cost soldiers. The freedom we cherish is paid for with the blood of the soldiers. From August 15, 1947 till January 26, 2022, 26,275 soldiers, sailors and airmen have made the supreme sacrifice. From those early days after gaining independence, we have seen a lot of conflicts and wars. 4 declared wars against Pakistan, an eminently forgettable conflict against China in 1962, the continuing aggression in the Siachen Glacier. Indian forces have lost lives in Sri Lanka as part of the Indian peacekeeping force. Unfortunately, the largest number of casualties have not come from declared wars, but from counterinsurgency and internal security operations. Primarily in the Kashmir Valley, where the forces maintain vigil to prevent militants from fomenting trouble, and soldiers keep spilling their blood and losing their lives.
Hello and welcome. I'm Chandan Lahiri. As a humble token of my gratitude to each and every soldier who has laid down his life, I'm undertaking an effort as a tribute to these brave hearts. I'm in the process of becoming a better golfer, and I will dedicate 1 stroke each to 10 soldiers who have been killed in action. There are 26,275 souls to be remembered, and I will hit 2,676 shots. As I hit these shots, you will get to pay your respects too, as their names scroll on the screen. Let us not forget their sacrifice. Let us cherish the freedom we enjoy thanks to these brave souls paying the ultimate price.
Two countries were born in 1947. Pakistan on August 14th, and India a day later on the 15th. India under British rule was a conglomeration of over 500 princely states. One of which was Jammu and Kashmir, then ruled by Maharaja Hari Singh. All the princely states were given the choice of acceding to either India or Pakistan. Maharaja Hari Singh had not decided one way or another. Pakistan precipitated the war a few weeks after its independence by launching tribal lashkars from Waziristan in an effort to capture Kashmir and to preempt the possibility of Hari Singh joining India. The Pakistani army prepared a plan called Operation Gulmarg and put it into action as early as August 20th, just a few days after Pakistan's independence. Some sources state that the Maharaja had decided as early as April 1947 that he would accede to India if it was not possible to stay independent. On August 11th, he dismissed his pro-Pakistan Prime Minister Ramchandra Kak and appointed retired Major Janak Singh in his place. On 25th August, he sent an invitation to Justice Meher Chand Mahajan of the Punjab High Court to become the Prime Minister. On the same day, the Muslim Conference wrote to the Pakistani Prime Minister, Liaquat Ali Khan, warning him that, quote, if God forbid the Pakistan government or the Muslim League do not act, Kashmir might be lost to them, unquote. This set the ball rolling in Pakistan. On October 22, 1947, Pakistan's Pashtun tribal militias moved to take over the capital city of Srinagar. Maharaja Hari Singh made a plea to India for assistance, and help was offered, subject to his signing the instrument of accession. Following the accession on October 26, 1947, Indian troops were airlifted to Srinagar. British commanding officers initially refused the entry of Pakistani troops into the conflict, but later, in 1948, they relented and Pakistan's armies entered the war. With its accession to India, Kashmir became legally Indian territory. Pakistan refused to recognize the accession, claiming it was obtained by fraud and violence. Governor General Muhammad Ali Jinnah ordered his army chief, General Douglas Gracie, to move Pakistani troops to Kashmir at once. However, the Indian and Pakistani forces were still under a joint command, and Field Marshal Auchinleck prevailed upon him to withdraw the order. The Pakistan Army made available arms, ammunition and supplies to the rebel forces who were dubbed the Azad Army. In May 1948, the Pakistani Army officially entered the conflict, in theory to defend the Pakistani borders, but it made plans to push towards Jammu and cut the lines of communications of the Indian forces. In Gilgit, the force of the Gilgit Scouts, under the command of a British officer, Major William Brown, mutinied and overthrew the governor Ghansara Singh. Brown prevailed on the forces to declare accession to Pakistan. The war between the two newly independent nations continued for almost 2 years. After protracted negotiations, both countries agreed to a ceasefire laid out in a UN Commission resolution adopted on January 5, 1949. This required Pakistan to withdraw its forces, both regular and irregular, while allowing India to maintain minimal forces within the state to preserve law and order. Upon compliance with these conditions, a plebiscite was to be held to determine the future of the territory. Pakistan has not withdrawn its forces from the areas that it captured in 1947-48, and therefore the plebiscite has still not been conducted. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was effectively divided between India and Pakistan. The front solidified along what later came to be known as the line of control and remains a festering wound till today. The Indian Armed Forces lost 2,845 soldiers in that first war fought as an independent nation to defend and protect its territorial integrity. After the war, a total number of 11 battle honours and 1 theatre honour were awarded to units of the Indian Army. Five soldiers were awarded the Paramveer Chakra, the highest gallantry award. Major Somnath Sharma, Lance Naik Karam Singh, Second Lieutenant Rama Raghovar Rane, Naik Jadunath Singh, Company Havildar Major Piru Singh Shekhawat. The 1940s and 50s were heady times in the subcontinent. India and Pakistan had become newly independent countries, while the People's Republic of China was established in 1949 after the Chinese Civil War. It was a time of Panchsheel and Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. At the time, the Chinese expressed no opposition to Nehru's open declarations of control over Aksai Chin. In 1956, Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai stated that he had no claims over Indian-controlled territory. However, the main cause of the war was a dispute over the sovereignty of the two widely geographically separated regions of Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. India claimed that Aksai Chin belonged to Ladakh, while China claimed it to be a part of Xinjiang. China's construction of a road connecting Tibet and Xinjiang was one of the triggers of the conflict. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru declared in Parliament that India regarded the McMahon Line as its official border. The Chinese expressed no concern at the statement, and in 1961 and 62, the government of China asserted that there were no frontier issues to be taken up with India. While Nehru wrote a memo calling for India's borders to be clearly defined and demarcated, official Chinese maps showed 120,000 square kilometers of Indian territory as Chinese, including Aksai Chin and northeast frontier area. The apparent progress in relations suffered a major setback when in 1959, Nehru provided asylum to the 14th Dalai Lama, who fled Lhasa after a failed Tibetan uprising against Chinese rule. Intermittent border incidents continued through this period. In August 1959, the PLA took an Indian prisoner at Longjo, which had an ambiguous position on the McMahon Line. And 2 months later in Aksai Chin, a clash at Konka Pass led to the death of 9 Indian frontier policemen. China's maps continued to show both the northeast frontier area and Aksai Chin to be Chinese territory. In 1960, Zhou Enlai unofficially suggested that India drop its claims to Aksai Chin in return for a Chinese withdrawal of claims over Nifa. Nehru believed that China did not have a legitimate claim over either of these territories and was not ready to concede them. He refused to conduct any negotiations until Chinese troops withdrew. In the summer of 1961, China began patrolling along the McMahon Line. They entered parts of Indian-administered regions. The Chinese, however, did not believe they were intruding upon Indian territory. In response, the Indians started creating outposts behind the Chinese troops, called the forward policy, first to cut off their supplies and force them to return. There were eventually 60 such outposts, including 43 in Aksai Chin. In 1961, Nehru appointed General B.M. Kaul as the army chief, who removed officers who resisted patrolling in disputed areas. According to the Home Minister in Delhi on 4th February 1962, quote, "If the Chinese will not vacate the areas occupied by her, India will have to repeat what she did in Goa. She will certainly drive out the Chinese forces." Unquote. The initial reaction of the Chinese forces was to withdraw when Indian outposts advanced towards them. However, this appeared to encourage the Indian forces to accelerate their forward policy even further. In response to Indian outposts encircling Chinese positions, Chinese forces built more outposts to counter-encircle these Indian positions. This pattern resulted in an interlocking deployment of Chinese and the Indian forces. Despite the encirclements by both sides, no hostile fire occurred from either side as troops from both sides were under orders to fire only in defense. On the situation, Mao commented, quote, "Nehru wants to move forward and we won't let him. Originally we tried to guard against this, but now it seems we cannot prevent it. If he wants to advance, we might as well adopt armed coexistence. You wave a gun and I'll wave a gun. We'll stand face to face and can practice our courage." Unquote. Skirmishes ensued between the two armies. On 11 September, it was decided that all forward posts and patrols were given permission to fire on any armed Chinese who entered Indian territory. On 6 October 1962, the Chinese Central Military Council decided to launch a large-scale attack to punish the military aggression from India. On 20th October 1962, the PLA launched attacks in Nifa and in Aksai Chin. Within the next 4 days, the PLA advanced 16 kilometers south of the control line prior to the conflict. Having reached its claim lines, the PLA did not advance further, and on 19 November declared a unilateral ceasefire. The aftermath of the war saw sweeping changes in the Indian military to prepare it for similar conflicts in the future, and placed pressure on Nehru, who was seen as responsible for failing to anticipate the Chinese attack on India. Neither side had declared war, used their air forces, or broken off diplomatic relations. But the 1962 conflict led to the death of 3,180 Indian soldiers, along with the memory of a humiliating defeat. Three soldiers were awarded the Paramveer Chakra. Major Dhan Singh Thapa, Subedar Joginder Singh, and Major Shaitan Singh. Since partition in 1947 and the formation of Pakistan and India, the two countries remained in contention over several issues, Kashmir being at the center of it. The Run of Kutch was another disputed region, a barren and desolate region in the western Indian state of Gujarat. In January 1965, Pakistani patrols began patrolling territory controlled by India, which was followed by attacks by both countries on each other's posts on 8th April 1965. Followed by intermittent skirmishes. In June 1965, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson intermediated to resolve the dispute. The tribunal that was set up awarded Pakistan 910 square kilometers of the Run of Kutch, against its original claim of 9,100 square kilometers. General Ayub Khan, the then President of Pakistan, believed the Indian Army would be unable to defend itself against a quick military campaign in Kashmir, as the Indian military had suffered a loss to China in 1962. Pakistan believed that the population of Kashmir was discontented with Indian rule and a resistance movement could be ignited. Pakistan attempted to ignite the resistance movement by means of a covert infiltration codenamed Operation Gibraltar. On August 5, 1965, between 26,000 and 33,000 Pakistani soldiers crossed the line of control, dressed as Kashmiri locals, headed for various areas within Kashmir. The infiltrators were soon discovered, the presence reported by local Kashmiris to the authorities, and Operation Gibraltar ended unsuccessfully. Indian forces crossed the ceasefire line on 15th August. Initially, the Indian Army met with considerable success, capturing 3 important mountain positions. Pakistan had made progress in Territorial, Uri and Poonch, while India captured the Haji Pir Pass, 8 kilometers inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir. On 1st September 1965, Pakistan launched a counterattack called Operation Grand Slam, with the objective to capture the vital town of Aknor in Jammu, which would sever communications and cut off supply routes to Indian troops. Ayub Khan calculated that Hindu morale could not stand more than a couple of hard blows at the right time and place. At 0330 hours on 1st September 1965, the entire Chhamb area came under massive artillery bombardment. India's army headquarters was taken by surprise. Attacking with an overwhelming ratio of troops and technically superior tanks, Pakistan made gains against Indian forces, who were caught unprepared and suffered heavy losses. India responded by calling in its air force to blunt the Pakistani attack. The next day, Pakistan retaliated. Its air force attacked Indian forces and air bases in both Kashmir and Punjab. India's decision to open up the theatre of attack into Pakistani Punjab forced the Pakistani army to relocate troops. Operation Grand Slam failed, and the Pakistan army was unable to capture Aknor. India crossed the international border on the Western Front on 6 September. The Indian 15th Infantry Division battled a massive counterattack by Pakistan near the west bank of the Ichagil Canal, the de facto border, bringing the Indian Army within the range of Lahore International Airport. The hostilities in the Rajasthan sector commenced on 8 September. The 17-day war caused thousands of casualties on both sides and witnessed the largest engagement of armored vehicles and the largest tank battle since World War II. The Battle of Asal Uttar is described as one of the largest tank battles in history since the Battle of Kursk in World War II. The Indian resistance near Khemkaran was one of the key turning points of the war, one which tilted the balance of the war in favor of India. Hostilities between the two countries ended after a ceasefire was declared through UNSC Resolution 211, following a diplomatic intervention by the Soviet Union and the United States, and the subsequent issuance of the Tashkent Declaration. The two countries fought to a standoff, but India had the upper hand when ceasefire was declared. On 20th September, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a resolution which demanded an unconditional ceasefire from both nations within 48 hours. India immediately accepted, while Pakistan accepted it on 23rd September, with some notable dramatics. India and Pakistan accused each other of ceasefire violations, with India charging Pakistan with 585 violations in 34 days, and Pakistan countering with accusations of 450 incidents by India. In addition to the expected exchange of small arms and artillery fire, India reported that Pakistan utilized the ceasefire to capture the Indian village of Chananwala in Fazilka. This village was recaptured by Indian troops on 25th December. The war was seen as a strategic and political defeat for Pakistan, since it did not succeed in either fomenting insurrection in Kashmir nor gain meaningful international support. The conflict generated a deep distrust between both countries, which lingers to this day. The War of 1965 cost the lives of 3,415 soldiers who died defending the freedom that we so cherish. After the war, a total of 16 battle honours and 3 theatre honours were awarded to units of the Indian Army. Company Quartermaster Havildar Abdul Hamid and Lieutenant Colonel A.B. Tarapur were both awarded the Paramveer Chakra posthumously. The Indo-Pakistani conflict of 1971 was sparked by the Bangladesh Liberation War, a conflict between the traditionally dominant West Pakistanis and the majority East Pakistanis. The political tensions between East and West Pakistan had its origin in the creation of Pakistan as a result of the partition of India in 1947. The geographical distance between the eastern and western parts of Pakistan was vast. East Pakistan lay over 1,600 kilometers away, which greatly hampered any attempt to integrate the Bengali and the Pakistani cultures. Tensions erupted ever since independence, with the language movement in 1950, the mass riots in 1964, and mass protests in 1969. These tensions led to the resignation of President Ayub Khan, who invited Army Chief General Yahya Khan to take over, who announced the first general elections. East Pakistan's Awami League gained 167 out of the 169 seats for the East Pakistan Legislative Assembly and a near absolute majority in the 313-seat National Assembly. The League's election success caused many West Pakistanis to fear that it would allow the Bengalis to draft the constitution. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the chairman of the Pakistan People's Party, refused to yield the premiership to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In reaction, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman called for general strikes that eventually shut down the government, and dissidents in the east began targeting the ethnic Bihari community, which supported West Pakistan. In early March 1971, approximately 300 Biharis were slaughtered in riots by Bengali mobs. The government of Pakistan used the Bihari massacre to justify its deployment of the military in East Pakistan on the night of 25th of March 1971, when it initiated its military crackdown on Dhaka, led by Lieutenant General Tikka Khan. The government outlawed the Awami League, which forced many of its members and sympathizers to seek refuge in India. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested on the night of 26th March 1971. Operation Searchlight attempted to kill the intellectual elite of East Pakistan. On 26th March 1971, Major Ziaur Rahman declared the independence of Bangladesh on behalf of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The East Pakistan Rifles and Bengali officers in Pakistan's Army, Navy and Marines defected to the rebellion and took refuge in India. The Mukti Bahini was formed. It is estimated that members of the Pakistani military and supporting pro-Pakistani Islamist militias killed between 300,000 and 3 million civilians in Bangladesh. Members of the Pakistani military and supporting pro-Pakistani Islamist militias called the Razakars raped between 200,000 and 400,000 Bangladeshi women and girls in a systematic campaign of genocidal rape. As a result of the conflict, a further 8 to 10 million people fled the country to seek refuge in India. The Indian government opened the East Pakistan-India border to allow the refugees to find safe shelter. The resulting flood of impoverished East Pakistani refugees strained India's already overburdened economy. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi expressed full support of her government for the independence struggle and concluded that instead of taking in millions of refugees, it was economical to go to war against Pakistan. On 28 April 1971, the cabinet ordered General Sam Manekshaw to go into East Pakistan. Defected East Pakistan military officers and the Indian Research and Analysis Wing started using the refugee camps for the recruitment and training of Mukti Bahini guerrillas. Indian authorities also carried out psychological warfare. The Shadeen Bangla Betar Kendro, or Free Bangladesh Radio Center, was relocated from Kalurghat in East Pakistan to India after the building was shelled by Pakistani jets on 30th March 1971. It resumed broadcasts on 3rd April from Tripura, aided by the Indian Border Security Force. The station was finally shifted to Calcutta, and its jurisdiction was transferred to the Provisional Bangladesh Government in Exile, and made its first broadcast on 25th of May, the birth anniversary of the poet Qazi Nazrul Islam, who would later be named Bangladesh's national poet. By November 1971, an Indo-Pak war was inevitable. The Soviet Union reportedly warned Pakistan against the war, which they termed as a suicidal course for Pakistan's unity. Despite the warning, in November 1971, thousands of people led by conservative Pakistani politicians marched in Lahore and across Pakistan, calling for Pakistan to crush India. On 23rd November, President Yahya Khan declared a national state of emergency and told the country to prepare for war. The war began when Pakistan launched Operation Chengiz Khan with preemptive aerial strikes on 11 Indian Air Force stations on the evening of 3rd December. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi held that the airstrikes were a declaration of war against India. Gandhi ordered the immediate mobilization of troops and launched a full-scale invasion of Pakistan. The Indian Air Force responded with airstrikes the same night and expanded to massive retaliatory airstrikes the next morning. This marked the official start of the Indo-Pak War of 1971 and a full-scale invasion of Pakistan involving massive air, sea and land assaults on Pakistan. The Indian objective on the Eastern Front was to capture Dhaka, and on the Western Front, was to prevent Pakistan from entering Indian soil. In the Western Theatre, the Indian Navy's Western Naval Command successfully launched a surprise attack on Karachi port on the night of 4th-5th December 1971 under the codename Trident, sinking Pakistan Navy's destroyer PNS Khaibar and the minesweeper PNS Muhafiz, while PNS Shah Jahan was badly damaged. In retaliation, the Pakistan Navy submarines began their operations to seek out major Indian warships. On 9 December 1971, PNS Hangor sank INS Kukri, inflicting 194 Indian casualties, and this attack was the first submarine kill since World War II. The Pakistan Air Force adopted a defensive stance in response to the Indian retaliation. As the war progressed, the Indian Air Force continued to battle the Pakistani Air Force over conflict zones, but the number of sorties flown by the PAF decreased every day. The Indian Air Force flew 4,000 sorties, while the Pakistan Air Force offered little in retaliation, partly because of the paucity of non-Bengali technical personnel. Before the start of the war, the Indian Army was well organized on both fronts and enjoyed significant numerical superiority over the Pakistan Army. The Indian Army's extraordinary war performance at both fronts restored the prestige, confidence, and dignity that it had lost during the Indochina War of 1962. When the conflict started, the war immediately took a decisive turn in favor of India and their Bengali rebel allies. Pakistan launched several ground offensives, but the Indian Army held its ground and initiated well-coordinated ground operations on both the eastern and western fronts. The Indian Army was successful in penetrating deep into Pakistani soil, including the capture of around 15,010 square kilometers of Pakistani territory in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Punjab, and Sindh. This captured territory was later ceded in the Simla Agreement of 1972 as a gesture of goodwill. The instrument of surrender was signed between Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the GOC&C of Indian Eastern Command, and Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi, the commander of the Pakistani Eastern Command, at the Ramna Racecourse in Dhaka at 16:31 hours on 16 December 1971. The war confirmed the independence of Bangladesh. Following the surrender, the Indian Army took approximately 90,000 Pakistani servicemen and their supporters as prisoners of war, making it the largest surrender since World War II. 4,089 Indian soldiers, sailors, and airmen made the supreme sacrifice by laying down their lives in battle. After the war, 41 battle honours and 4 theatre honours were awarded to units of the Indian Army. 4 Armed Forces personnel were awarded the highest gallantry award, the Paramveer Chakra, 3 of them posthumously, and the only Air Force officer to have been awarded the PBC. Lance Naik Albert Ecker, Flying Officer Nirmaljit Singh Shekhon, Major Hoshyar Singh, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetrapal. Operation Meghdoot is the code name for the Indian Armed Forces operation to seize control of the Siachen Glacier, which became a bone of contention following a vague demarcation of territories. Executed on 13 April 1984, Operation Meghdoot was the first military offensive of its kind. The operation preempted Pakistan's impending Operation Ababil, which was intended to achieve the same objective as Operation Meghdoot. The operation was a success, resulting in Indian forces gaining control of the 70-kilometer-long Siachen Glacier, all of its tributary glaciers, and 3 main passes of the Saltoro Ridge, Siala, Bilafondla, and Gyongla, thus giving India the tactical advantage of holding higher grounds. The Indian Army remains the first and only army in the world to have taken tanks and other heavy ordnance up to such an altitude of well over 16,000 feet. Up to 10 infantry battalions each of the Indian and Pakistani armies are actively deployed at high altitudes of up to 21,000 feet throughout the region of the glacier. Pakistan launched all-out assaults in 1987 and in 1989 to capture the ridge and passes held by India. The first assault was headed by then Brigadier General Pervez Musharraf and initially managed to capture a few high points before being pushed back. Later the same year, Pakistan lost one major post, the Khyber post. Though fire is exchanged between the two armies on the icy heights, the major reason for casualties is the cold and the altitude. Many die in avalanches or after falling into crevasses. A total of 1,005 soldiers have died to date as part of Operation Meghdut. Bana Post is the highest battlefield post in the world today at a height of 22,143 feet above sea level. Subedar Bana Singh was awarded the Paramveer Chakra for the assault that captured Khyber Post. Operation Pavan was the operation by the Indian peacekeeping force as part of the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord to enforce the disarmament of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or LTTE, better known as the Tamil Tigers. The first IPKF operation was launched on 9th October 1987 to neutralize LTTE's operational capability and chain of command. The Tamil Tigers had fought to establish a Tamil homeland separate from Sri Lanka. This led to armed conflicts with the Sri Lankan military. In the late 1980s, India, feeling considerable pressure from its Tamil nationals, began to intervene at diplomatic and military levels, leading to the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord, signed in Colombo on 29 July 1987, under which the Sri Lankan government agreed to give the nation's provinces more power and autonomy and withdraw its troops. The Tigers had not participated in the talks and declared their intent to continue armed struggle for an independent Tamil Eelam. The IPKF soon found itself engaged against the Tigers. The IPKF set out to disarm the LTTE by taking Jaffna by force. The first battle was the heliborne assault on the Jaffna University headquarters of the LTTE on the night of 12th October. The operation ended in disaster as the LTTE, having intercepted radio transmissions, set up an ambush. The heli-drop troops came under intense fire, forcing the helicopters to abandon the insertion. During the battle that lasted through the night, 29 of the 30 Sikh Allied troops and 2 of the 17 Special Forces commandos were killed. After 2 weeks of bitter fighting, the IPKF wrested control, with major operations ending with the fall of Jaffna Fort on 28 November. By the time the troops were back in the homeland, 1,171 had lost their lives, fighting bravely against a guerrilla force that employed unconventional tactics, blended with the local population, and employed child soldiers. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated by the LTTE as a fallout of Operation Pavan. Major Ramaswamy Parameswaran was posthumously awarded the Paramveer Chakra for his bravery. Operation Vijay, popularly known as the Kargil War, was a conflict fought from May to July 1999. The cause of the war was the infiltration of Pakistani troops, disguised as Mujahideen, into positions on the Indian side of the LOC during the winter of 1998-99. Its aim was to sever the link between Kashmir and Ladakh, causing Indian forces to withdraw from the Siachen Glacier and forcing India to negotiate a settlement on the broader Kashmir dispute. Pakistan also believed that any tension in the region would internationalize the Kashmir issue, helping it to secure a speedy resolution. The Indian Air Force acted jointly with the Indian Army ground troops to flush out regular and irregular troops of the Pakistan Army from vacated Indian positions along the LOC. During the initial stages of the war, Pakistan blamed the fighting entirely on independent Kashmiri insurgents, but documents left behind by casualties and later statements by Pakistan's Prime Minister and the Chief of Army Staff showed the involvement of Pakistani paramilitary forces. The Indian Armed Forces recaptured a majority of the positions on the Indian side of the LOC. The war is the most recent example of high-altitude warfare in mountainous terrain. It is also the sole instance of direct conventional warfare between two nuclear states. 674 soldiers laid down their lives on the AIC battlefield. 4 soldiers were awarded the Paramveer Chakra. Grenadier Yogendra Yadav, Rifleman Sanjay Kumar, Lieutenant Manoj Kumar Pandey, Captain Vikram Batra. Op Parakram in 2001-2002 was a military standoff between India and Pakistan that resulted in the massing of troops on the border and along the LOC. The military buildup was initiated by India, responding to multiple terrorist attacks by Pakistan-based terror groups backed by the Pakistan ISI. On 18th May, Prime Minister Vajpayee reviewed the preparedness for a possible war. The same day, India expelled the Pakistani High Commissioner. On 22nd May, Prime Minister Vajpayee asked the troops to prepare for a decisive battle. On 29 July, India used air power to attack positions held by the Pakistani forces. On 20th December, India mobilized and deployed its troops to Kashmir and Punjab in what was India's largest military mobilization since the 1971 conflict. In late December, both countries moved ballistic missiles closer to each other's border. By January 2002, India had mobilized around 5 lakh troops and 3 armored divisions on Pakistan's border, concentrated along the LOC. Pakistan responded by deploying around 3 lakh troops. Towards the end of the protracted military standoff, India's Jat Regiment occupied point 5070 on the Pakistani side of the LOC near Dras. The peak gave India a vantage view of Gultari Valley, which sustained Pakistani posts. Tensions remained high for the next few months. By October 2002, troops were demobilized and a ceasefire was signed. Despite the fact that a full-scale war did not break out, there was fighting between the two armies. This resulted in the Indian Army suffering 780 casualties. India has a proud history of UN peacekeeping dating back to its inception in the 1950s, contributing nearly 195,000 troops, the largest number from any country. 114 soldiers have shed blood on foreign soil as part of UN missions. Captain Gurcharan Singh Salaria was posthumously awarded the Paramveer Chakra for action in Katanga, southern Congo. The Wound Medal is awarded to those who get wounded on the battlefield. It is the only medal that is not awarded posthumously. Unfortunately, there is no medal that is awarded to those killed in action. Not one of the 26,275 bravehearts have been awarded any medal, apart from the few who have been awarded gallantry awards for bravery. This is sad and a travesty. If we cannot remember and commemorate the ultimate sacrifice by at least awarding a final medal, do we really deserve the sacrifice they have made? This is something to seriously think about and maybe even take retrospective measures to correct this injustice. Indian troops have been involved in many operations in the 75 years since independence. Many of these operations have been in the face of a hostile enemy at our borders, while others have been for internal security and counterinsurgency duties. 301 soldiers have made the supreme sacrifice in these operations. Since these are not official wars, there have been no awards of the Paramveer Chakra, but many brave soldiers have been awarded its peacetime equivalent, the Ashok Chakra. Interestingly, Colonel Nilakanthan Jayachandran Nair was awarded both the Ashok Chakra and the Kirti Chakra. He is technically the highest decorated officer of the Indian Armed Forces. He was commissioned into 16 Maratha Light Infantry. In 1983, in Mizoram, he engaged insurgents in intense close-quarters combat, for which he was awarded the Kirti Chakra. A decade later, in December 1993, when his unit was deployed in Nagaland, He was leading an advance party convoy when they were ambushed by about 100 insurgents. The overwhelming fire from automatic weapons killed one JCO and 13 Jawans on the spot. Colonel Nair, who was seriously injured, did not lose courage. Unmindful of his serious injury, he organized his Jawans in an assault and charged at the insurgents. For his courage and gallantry, he was awarded the Ashok Chakra posthumously in 1994. He exemplifies the courage displayed in the face of the enemy and the sacrifices made by the 26,275 soldiers, sailors, and airmen who have laid down their lives fighting the enemies of the nation we hold so dear. The primary objective of the Indian Armed Forces is to defend and protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the motherland. There are elements that surface every once in a while who question this integrity and raise the possibility of secession from the Indian Union. Others want to bring about change by the use of force or by attempting to overthrow elected governments. Law and order often breaks down, life is disrupted, and the armed forces are called in to bring in calm. Sometimes fire is exchanged between the insurgents and the armed forces. Every single time the insurgents have been overpowered and their intentions have been nullified. Unfortunately, this is a continuing menace, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir, that is considered one of the most hostile zones in the world. The two most famous of such counterinsurgency and internal security operations were Operation Blue Star in Punjab in 1984 to remove Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale and his followers from the buildings of the Harmandir Sahib complex, and Operation Black Tornado, carried out during the time of the Mumbai terror attacks in 2008. In fact, there have been multiple operations conducted in the Golden Temple in Amritsar. In 1955, to curb the Punjabi Suba Morcha. Operation Blue Star in 1984. Operations Black Thunder 1 and 2 in 1986 and 88 respectively. In 1987, to capture the militant Gurjit Singh, who was suspected to be hiding in the premises. In 1992, to stop the commemoration of the assassination of General A.S. Vaidya, the Chief of the Army Staff, who commanded Operation Blue Star. The armed forces are also called out to aid civil authorities in times of natural calamities and disasters. Whether it be a flood or an earthquake or a landslide or a cloudburst or an avalanche, the Indian Armed Forces come as a relief force to aid the civil authorities in bringing succor to the people. The Army, Navy and Air Force have also been involved in humanitarian operations to evacuate citizens from strife-torn regions around the world. The Indian Navy participated in Operation Searchlight in 2014 to search for the missing Malaysian flight MH17. Ridding the country of militants, terrorists, extremists and insurgents needs to be countered violently and aggressively. There are firefights that break out, soldiers are ambushed, become victims of suicide attacks, blown up with improvised explosive devices, and many end up paying with their lives. In the 27,193 days since Independence Day on August 15, 1947, to January 26, 2022, 8,701 soldiers have paid with their lives defending the very freedom we hold so dear, the freedom we cherish so much, the freedom that we would not enjoy had it not been for the bravery and the selfless sacrifices made by some very brave men. 8,701 soldiers, sailors, and airmen who have died on the battlefield to ensure that we sleep in peace in our homes. The Ashok Chakra is India's highest peacetime military decoration, awarded for valor, courageous action, or self-sacrifice away from the battlefield. It is the peacetime equivalent of the Paramveer Chakra and is awarded for the most conspicuous bravery or some daring or preeminent valor or self-sacrifice other than in the face of the enemy. The decoration may be awarded either to military or civilian personnel. As of August 2021, the medal has been awarded to 86 awardees, of which 68 were to posthumous recipients. The awardees include one Air India pilot, 2 members of the Andhra Pradesh Police, 12 civilians, 1 CRPF person, 1 from Delhi Police, 1 from J&K Police, 2 from Madhya Pradesh Police, 2 from Maharashtra Police, 1 from Meghalaya Police, 1 from Odisha Police, 1 NCC cadet, 3 soldiers of the NSG, 1 from the police service, 2 security assistants in the Rajya Sabha Secretariat, 1 colonel of the Soviet Air Force, and 1 Soviet flight engineer. Hemant Karkare and Ashok Kamte were awarded for their role during the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai. In addition to these civilians, there are also 3 airmen and 49 soldiers who have been awarded the Ashok Chakra. Due to the reasons of brevity and time, we have not listed those who have been awarded the bravery awards of Mahavir Chakra and Veer Chakra or their peacetime equivalents, the Shaurya Chakra and Kirti Chakra. Each of these individuals has displayed exceptional bravery and are equally deserving of our gratitude. We salute them for their valor and, in many cases, their ultimate sacrifice. Let us quietly continue to read the names of all those bravehearts who have died fighting an unknown and unseen and unconventional enemy in a war with no name. Let there be peace on earth, so that not one more soldier needs to die to ensure peace.
That was my humble tribute, my heartfelt homage, my sincere dedication to the 26,275 bravehearts who made the ultimate sacrifice. 2,628 shots to remember those who died defending the integrity of the country, preserving the very idea of India, a free and sovereign nation. Let their memory be a blessing. As General George Patton said, there's only one way for a professional soldier to die. That's from the last bullet of the last battle of the last war. We hope that it is soon that the last war has been fought, the last bullet has been fired, and we do not lose any more soldiers. We owe these brave hearts our thoughts and gratitude. We do not know them all, but we certainly owe them all. Let us not forget the promise we made to that soldier who lay dying on the battlefield when he told us, "When you go home, tell them of us, for their tomorrow we gave our today." Jai Hind.